A cold stone floor, bare feet, and thousands of angry eyes. My hands are trembling. In front of me lies a document from the Florence archives, dated 1342. The ink has faded, the paper torn. But what it says still bleeds like an open wound. The woman for adultery against her husband will be publicly displayed. Her hair will be shaved. I am a historian. I've spent years studying medieval European documents. I've read thousands of pages. But when I first opened this file in the dim light of the archives, I started shaking. Because history isn't just about kings and queens. History is about women who suffered in silence. Today I'm going to tell you a story. But be warned, this story will disturb you, because this is the story of how women labeled as adulteresses were destroyed. Snow was falling that morning. Winter of 1287. Cologne was freezing. A wooden post had been erected in the city's central square. Hundreds of people had gathered around it. When I imagine this scene, I close my eyes, because when you read court records, the words come alive before your eyes. I know what happened in that square that morning. And this knowledge sometimes feels like a curse. A woman was brought forward. Her name was Margareta. She was 23 years old. Her hands were bound. Her hair had been cut. She wore a torn sack. The crowd began shouting, "Whore! Sinner! Burn her!" Margareta lowered her head. She wasn't crying, because there were no tears left. What was her crime? Her husband beat her. Every night. Her face would bruise, her ribs would crack. And one day Margareta found comfort in another man's arms. Just once she embraced him. But that single time was enough. Her neighbor had reported her, and Margareta was caught. Now she was here, about to be tied to the shame post. In the city square, in front of everyone, 2 guards tied her to the post. They hung a heavy wooden sign around her neck. A single word was written on it: adulterer. Adulterous. Hours passed. The crowd kept shouting. Children threw stones. A woman spat at her. Margareta stood motionless. She closed her eyes and never opened them again. The next morning, her body was found there. She had frozen to death. Write in the comments, what city, what country are you watching this from? I'm curious, because this story isn't just about the medieval period, it's about humanity's dark side. In medieval Europe, adultery wasn't just a sin. It was a crime that shook society's foundations. At least that's what the church said. The 7th commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. This commandment was repeated in every priest's sermon. Canon law defined adulterous women as sinners rebelling against God. Secular courts turned this sin into a crime and punished bodies. But there's one detail, a very important detail. Men who committed adultery usually got away with a fine. They'd pay a few silver coins. The priest would absolve them. They'd return to their lives, as if nothing had happened. But for women, the same crime meant death. Why? Because a woman's body was property, her husband's property, and damaging that property was the greatest crime. I found a document in the archives from 1456 Paris, written by a priest. A woman's adultery means the corruption of lineage. Therefore, it is more dangerous than a man's adultery. Woman is the carrier of lineage. If she lies with another man, whose child will it be? The bloodline will be corrupted. Inheritance will be confused. Therefore, the woman must be severely punished. That's it. That's the real reason. Women were controlled because of the children they would bear. They didn't own their bodies. They didn't own their lives. And the punishments. The punishments were horrifying. Please like this video and subscribe. What comes next is even darker, even more terrifying. The first type of punishment: public humiliation. Adulterous women were paraded naked through town squares, sometimes completely naked, sometimes in torn sacks. Wooden signs were hung around their necks. Adultery would be written on them. Sometimes obscene pictures were drawn. In Germany, this was called Schandpfahl, the shame post. In England, there was a device called the pillory. The woman's head and hands would be locked in wooden holes. She'd stay like that for hours. People would come, throw stones at her, spit on her, insult her. There was also the cucking stool. This was even more cruel. The woman would be tied to a wooden chair. The chair was attached to a long pole, and that pole was mounted at the edge of the town pond. Then what? The woman would be dunked underwater. Repeatedly, her head would go underwater. She'd run out of breath. She'd reach the point of drowning. Then she'd be pulled out, allowed to breathe, and dunked again. This torture could last for hours. There's a story in the court records of a woman named Agnes, 1402, Norwich, England. She was accused of adultery. She was tied to the cucking stool, dunked 7 times. On the 7th time, she never came back up. She had drowned. The court record states, the woman died during torture. God's will, God's will. That's what they said. As if it were an accident, as if they hadn't killed her. The second type of punishment, corporal punishment. In some regions, adulterous women's noses would be cut off. Yes, you heard that right. Their noses. In 13th century France, this was very common, because the nose was seen as the symbol of unchastity. If a woman was involved in adultery, her nose should be cut off. So everyone would recognize her. Everyone would know, this woman is a sinner. There's a case in Normandy, 1289. A woman was caught in adultery. The court decision stated, the woman's nose will be cut off. Her ears will be pierced. Then she will be displayed in the town square for 3 days. And so it happened. The woman's nose was cut off. Her ears were pierced. She was left bloody in the square. 3 days later, she died from infection. There were other places that were even more brutal. In some German towns, adulterous women's fingers would be cut off. In some Italian cities, their hair would be shaved and their faces branded with hot iron. There's a document from the Milan archives. 1367. A woman was accused of adultery. Her sentence, a cross will be branded on her face. Thus she will be prevented from sinning. A cross with hot iron on her face. Close your eyes and imagine. Imagine that pain. Imagine that smell. Imagine the burning flesh, and now imagine this. This woman had perhaps only fallen in love. Perhaps her husband beat her, tortured her. Perhaps for the first time in her life, just once, she experienced tenderness. And her punishment, a cross branded on her face. The third type of punishment, stoning and burning. This was the harshest punishment, and the rarest, but it still happened. Especially in the theocratic regions of the Holy Roman Empire, adultery was considered the greatest sin against God. And the punishment? Death. Bavaria. A woman was caught with a married man. Both were married. The court decided both will be stoned. The court record states the woman and man were taken outside the town, placed in a pit. Their hands were bound. The people began throwing stones. First small stones, then large stones. The woman was screaming. The man was silent. After an hour, both were dead. 1 hour. 1 hour under a rain of stones. Skulls shattered, ribs crushed, faces rendered unrecognizable, and finally silence. But even stoning wasn't enough sometimes. In some regions, burning at the stake was ordered. Florence. A woman was accused of having relations with a priest. Court decision. She will be burned alive. The woman was tied to a stake in the city square. Wood was piled around her. A priest read a prayer. Lord, forgive this sinful soul, but punish the body. The fire was lit, smoke rose. Screams were heard, then silence, and the crowd dispersed, as if a circus show had ended. Noble women were a bit luckier. They weren't burned, they weren't stoned, because noble blood was still valuable, but they too had their punishment. If a noble woman committed adultery, her hair would be shaved. She'd be made to repent publicly. Then she'd be sent to a monastery for penance. She'd stay in that monastery for years, sometimes for life. She could never go outside, couldn't see her family, couldn't see her children. There's a document, 1389. An Italian countess was accused of adultery. Court decision. The countess will be sent to Santa Maria Monastery. She will stay there for 20 years. Will receive no visitors. We'll only pray. The woman was 28 years old. She stayed in that monastery until she was 48. Spoke to no one, saw no sunlight, only stared at cold stone walls. When she was released after 20 years, she had gone mad. Didn't even remember her own name. So what happened to the men? Men usually received a fine. They'd pay a few silver coins, go to the priest, confess their sins, and that was it. Lord, forgive me. I won't do it again. You are forgiven, my son. Go and sin no more, that's it. That's simple. But in some cases, the man would be killed too. How? By the woman's husband. In Italy and Spain, honor killing was legal. If a man caught his wife with another man, he could kill them both and face no punishment, because this was defense of honor. Naples, a man caught his wife and her lover in bed. He stabbed them both. He went to court. The judge asked, "Why did you kill them?" The man answered, "To protect my honor." The judge said, "You are right. You are free to go," and the man went home. As if nothing had happened. Why did these punishments exist? Why were they so cruel? Because adultery wasn't just an individual crime. It was a violation of social order. Medieval society was built on a very rigid order. Everyone had their place, their role. Women were to be faithful wives and good mothers. Men were to be strong and honorable. The church would control everyone. And if someone broke this order, then they had to be punished. To be an example to everyone, punishments were public, in squares in front of everyone, because the goal wasn't just to punish. The goal was to make sin visible. Look, here is the adulterous woman. Here is her end. Crowds would come, watch. Children would come, learn. And everyone would understand, if I do this too, my end will be the same. Fear, control, obedience. These are the three magic words of the medieval period. During the Renaissance, things slowly began to change. The church's power decreased. The Enlightenment came. Human rights began to be discussed. By the 18th century, adultery became a private legal matter. Public punishments were abolished. Women were no longer displayed in squares. Noses were no longer cut off. But remember, this change took hundreds of years. And during those hundreds of years, thousands of women were killed. Thousands of women were tortured. Thousands of women were punished simply for loving, and no one wept for them. Dear viewers, this story was dark. I know. But these stories must be told because history isn't just the story of heroes. History is also the story of victims. Of the forgotten. Do you remember Margareta, the young woman who froze to death in the Cologne Square? She was real. She's in the documents. 1287, Cologne Archives. Do you remember Agnes? The woman who drowned in Norwich. She was real too. 1402, Norwich court records. They were all real. They all lived. They all suffered. And they were all forgotten. But I don't forget them. And I ask you, don't forget them either. If this video moved you, please like it. Please subscribe and write in the comments. What did you learn from this story? What historical story would you like me to tell next? There are more stories from the medieval period to today. More forgotten voices, more lost lives, and I will tell them all because my mission isn't finished yet. History waits silently, and I give it a voice. Until next time.